U.S. President Donald Trump said today that he does not believe Russian claims about a Ukrainian strike on Putin's residence. Earlier, during a phone conversation, President Vladimir Putin complained to former U.S. President Donald Trump that Ukrainian drones had allegedly attacked his official residence located in the Novgorod region. However, the United States National Security Agency later concluded that Ukraine did not attempt to attack or target Putin's residence at all. So it's clear that the Kremlin is once again trying to withdraw from the negotiation process to end the war. Why is a world where peace means war still more beneficial for Putin? Sergei Yeremenko looked into it.
Russia will have to end the war as soon as they find one more reason for peace than for fighting.
These words were spoken in the president's 20-minute New Year's address, literally moments before midnight. This is obviously not an expectation of enlightenment from the Russian authorities, nor a hope that Putin and the rest will suddenly develop even a basic instinct for self-preservation. This is a statement of fact. From 2014 onward, and even more so since 2022, the Russian authorities have never had even one more reason for peace than for war. Now, on January 5th, 2026, it's clear that nothing has changed because the war continues, cities are being destroyed, and people are dying.
For them, this is an existential war, just as it is for us, because Putin started this war not to end it with just 4 regions of Ukraine. And we remember his ultimatum to NATO to pull back to the 1997 borders. Nothing has changed since then, since December 21st, 2021. Moreover, this is a war for the redistribution of spheres of influence, not only in Europe or Eurasia. In fact, I would say that this war is actually the first step in the redistribution of the entire global world order.
That makes Russia's participation in these negotiations seem even more puzzling. But in reality, unlike the reasons for this war or the necessity of waging it, the Kremlin's involvement in peace talks is more than logical.
So in order not to make things any worse for themselves than they already are, to clearly show that they are in fact a part of the ongoing negotiation process, and well, if you'll excuse me, to play dumb with President Trump, and to try, perhaps somewhat naively, to convince him that he could potentially end yet another war at any moment now, and in doing so, take a significant step toward being considered for the prestigious Nobel Peace Prize. In this case, is actually completely rational. Unlike the reasons for this war and its stated objectives, which are often debated and discussed, here they simply want to avoid any additional sanctions from the United States for as long as possible, since those are quite painful and damaging, as we've seen with both Rosneft and Lukoil.
But at the same time, Putin and his cronies can't keep pretending forever that they're interested in the negotiation process. But they also really don't want any new sanctions from the United States. So then they come up with the story about a raid by Ukrainian drones on Putin's Valdai residence.
Mr. President, the Russians are saying that Ukraine tried to strike Putin's residence. Do you have any additional information that would perhaps verify or confirm this?
No, I don't know anything about that. I just heard about it now, but I have no information. That would be very bad. That would not be good.
This video shows Trump's first reaction to the Russian fabrication. There was also a second reaction, where Trump recounted a phone conversation with Putin, in which Putin complained about the bloodthirsty Ukrainians who nearly deprived the dictator of his favorite aqua disco. At that time, Trump spoke quite harshly toward Ukraine, and the Russians announced that because of this, they would reconsider their negotiating position. In reality, reading between the lines, it wasn't about reconsidering at all, but about withdrawing from peace talks, because peace in Ukraine would mean chaos in Russia.
It would simply fall apart. Because of the ongoing civil war, because of the severe economic collapse, and because of internal political problems with elite infighting, these issues have all contributed. That's why we see such chaotic and unpredictable actions, because they want to make it appear as though it wasn't them who left the negotiations first, but rather that it was Ukraine. They're really trying to make it so that it's not the Russian Federation, not the Kremlin, that ends up being blamed or held responsible for derailing or disrupting these important peace talks, but instead that the blame falls on Ukraine.
Back then, it seemed like Trump took the Kremlin leader at his word, but that's just how it seems.
Leading and well-known media outlets, your The Wall Street Journal, CNN, and Deutsche Welle, released and published intelligence data, citing their own sources that directly refute the reported drone attack on Putin's residence. The CIA determined that the 91 drones Moscow claimed existed were a fabrication. And other sources say that, in fact, it's not just a simple fabrication. They were actually headed to attack other targets as well.
And the day before New Year's, Trump was reposting on his social media an article from his favorite publication, The New York Post, titled, "Putin's Loud Attack Shows Who's Really Standing in the Way of Peace." But the main point of this article, it's astonishing that Putin, who has been waging a brutal war for almost 4 years, believes that any violence on his own territory deserves special outrage. After all, Russia launched 131 drones on Christmas in Kyiv and other cities, killing 7 civilians. Civilians! The Kremlin deliberately targets apartment buildings and power plants to punish ordinary Ukrainian citizens. The Russians are kidnapping children, torturing and executing prisoners. Moreover, Moscow has repeatedly tried to kill Zelensky. Any attack on Putin is more than justified. And so January 5th. Aboard his plane, Trump says he does not believe the Kremlin's claims that Ukraine allegedly attacked the Russian dictator's residence. Putin, who is accustomed to not having to justify himself to his domestic audience, obviously will not be able to get away with just dumb silence this time. Those who still support the Russian authorities, Fico, Orban, and Putin, whom Kremlin propaganda likes to describe with bold and impressive phrases like outplayed everyone, won't be able to just turn a blind eye this time. This time he really truly messed up.